is Up the Rovers.
Welcome along to episode 1 of Up the Rovers, a brand new podcast all about Featherstone Rovers. It's your one-stop shop for all the news and views for everything that's going on at the Millennium Stadium. My name's Darren Harper and I'll be with you over this first season for 10 episodes where we look at everything that's happening at the club. And big thanks, of course, to the main club partners, KP, Millennium Support, Went Valley Aggregates and Wakefield AFC. The podcast is brought to you by LS11 Media and Proper Sport. And joining us on this first episode of 10 in the first season is, first of all, the CEO of Featherstone Rovers, and that is Davide Longo. Hello, Dav.
Hello, Darren. You all right?
I'm very good. How are you?
Yeah, not too bad.
This is your first podcast you've been on, Dav.
Yeah, it's exciting times, isn't it?
I know, it's good. And we've also got, we've brought out the big guns for the first podcast, Dav, but not just the CEO, but we've also got the head coach of Leeds Rhinos, and that is Richard Agar. Hello, Rich.
Darren, how are you, mate? I've been called many things over my time. Big guns has rarely been used that often.
Well, definitely worth mentioning that today. So thanks very much for joining us. Of course, if you'd like to leave us a nice review on Apple Podcasts, that would be great. Make sure it's a 5-star one, otherwise, what's the point? And make sure you subscribe. And of course, if you are listening to this on YouTube or Rovers TV, make sure you follow us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Up the Rovers is where this podcast will be based long term.
Up the Rovers, the official Featherstone Rovers podcast.
Okay. It's been a while since I've been here, and it feels really weird being back and seeing. First of all, the pitch looks amazing, Dav.
Yeah, we've done a lot of work on the pitch. Obviously, it's not had a lot of usage this year. The football team's been down here playing on it a couple of times, but we've done a lot of work. We invested in some equipment, brand new tractor, lawnmower, and some treatments for the pitch. So it's looking great. And it was great last week seeing the players back in at the stadium.
Bit of training.
Yeah, they're all looking smart and happy, and I think they're raring to go, to be honest.
Rich, I mean, you've obviously still been playing during all of this. I mean, first of all, what's it been like over this sort of like lockdown and COVID for Super League and for Leeds Rhinos? Because from outside, it's looked incredibly difficult. I would imagine most of Super League were just quite happy that they'd actually got the grand final and got it over and done with.
Yeah, I think so. I think we've all had the attitude of, we've just got to get out there and fulfill fixtures and keep the season, the game and the sport up and running, really. So there's been a lot of, difficult moments, factors in there what you wouldn't encounter in a normal season, and you can either whinge about it and carry on or just get on with it. And we've been at the attitude that whatever it throws at us, and sort of however it impacts the season, we were just going to get on with it. And if that meant we had to move our team about, give some young kids a go, I wouldn't say go into games knowing that you weren't going to win, but we felt we had to, at times, look after our squad. Obviously, making the Challenge Cup final led to us putting some inexperienced teams out in some really important games. So I don't think there were a club that wasn't impacted. The way of working were different. We had a COVID case. We had a number of track and traces, including myself, who couldn't turn up to a playoff game. So it was very, very different, very, very difficult. And touch wood, by the time we get back, it'd be nice to think that things might have moved on and changed a little bit.
I suppose, Dav, I mean, at least they've been playing and, there's been sort of a rugby league going on. But from a championship point of view, you've not had anything to play for over this year. It must have been incredibly difficult.
No, our last game were against Hunslet Hawks, still called Hawks, I don't know, Hunslet down here in the Challenge Cup. And
is that your last game?
That was the last game, and we played on a Friday. It were Friday the 13th, if I remember rightly.
That's right, yeah.
And then I fielded a phone call off John Flatman at York on the Monday, and he that was going to be our next league game, and he said that the game might be called off, and I kind of nonsense that phone call. I said, no, it won't be called, and we haven't played since. So, right. I think a lot of credit goes to Super League. I think the clubs have, like Rich has said, they've managed the situation brilliantly. I think when they decided to take the grand final to Hull, a lot of people had questioned why they did that. I thought it was a fantastic spectacle. I thought it came across really well on the TV. the grand final were a great game as well. I suppose what's been quite strange for me is because I've not experienced a live game. I've experienced it through the TV, and I can hear the crowd noise through the TV, which again has been pretty good. But I suppose the coach and players, when you can hear that contact. I mean, I think we saw it at the football, didn't we, where Raul Jimenez had cracked heads, and you could hear that crack of heads. And I think I watched an international game a couple of weeks ago where the substitute got a yellow card for comments made to the referee. Now, obviously, when crowds would have been in, you would have never heard the substitutes commenting about the referee, but again, without the crowds in. So I think it's been strange, and I mean, I don't know if Rich wants to touch on that.
Yeah, I think a couple of things you've mentioned there. I think Sky and BBC, when it's been Challenge Cup, I think they've done a really good job with the coverage. I think the way they've sort of changed the camera angles, they don't really pan up to the wider shots where the fans would be as much as what they used to. They keep the camera angles a little bit lower. They've got the noise in the background. I think the commentators and the pundits have done a really good job understanding, where the game's at and some of the challenges involved in it. And I think they've done a tremendous job to make sure that we have had a product. And I think when lockdown went on and there was nothing going on and no sport, I think everybody would sort of, hoping that sport got back because it gave everybody a little bit of something to look forward to on a weekend. But it is strange. It's we hear the noises a fair bit at training, so the noises of the game is not as much of a I guess novelty to us. But I think. The first couple of times you watch it and you can hear those sounds, communication, noises. I'll use an example. Challenge Cup final at Wembley. I think there were 90 people in there, and Richie Myler won the Lansdowne Trophy. And the number of journalists that commented to me after that he sort of edged the Lansdowne Trophy, didn't realise the impact he had on the game with his communication, both offensively and defensively. So I think that was a real eye opener, to some very experienced watchers of the game, to think, they didn't quite realise, the impact what one person's communication could have on your team.
Also, on the flip side of that, I don't think there's no hiding place for players. So if you're shouting something from the sidelines, I've certainly seen it at like football at Bradford City. If the manager's shouting at a player, telling him to do something, the player hasn't got an excuse like, "Well, I couldn't hear. I couldn't hear." There's no hiding place, Rich. I don't know if any of your players have found that.
You can hear, there's obviously more vocal players in the game. We saw one retire on Friday night, go out in a blaze of glory in James Graham, and James is very, very vocal, and I think it surprised some people in the stadium to hear him carrying on like he carries on at times.
I'm interested as well. Is obviously your relationship with Featherstone Rovers, and you come from around this area, and was this one of the first teams that you ever came to watch rugby league at?
No, not really, and I guess that's the story in itself. Is not my uncle played for Featherstone in the 60s. My dad made his debut in 1968 here, and obviously played and coached the club and coached them twice. So, as a local junior, growing up around it, I did. But because my dad was a player and a coach too, quite often I would, I would go and watch his team as in my formative years. But having said that, when I started playing for Featherstone Lions, what's Traveller Saints Juniors now, we always used to get a free season ticket as part of being a young player. So a lot of my mates, we would, whether we were from North Featherstone or South Featherstone, the guys who play for Travellers would meet up and come down here and stand in the bullock shed. Obviously, when my dad was coach, I watched him then, but then towards sort of my later teenage years, I became more of a regular rather than going off with my dad's team. So, I've got a sort of long and I guess storied history and connection with the club. Being a Featherstone boy, they have always been. I always keep an eye out for them and always been close to my heart, really. And if ever my team hasn't got a game or in terms of work, I don't need to be off here, there, and everywhere watching someone. I'll always try and find time. To come and watch the Rovers.
And your relationship with Dav goes back quite a long way.
Yeah, we played together at Dewsbury in, I'm trying to think.
93.
Is that when it was?
Yeah.
It's a long time ago.
1993.
In 1993, yeah. I would say I taught him all I know, but I'd best be careful saying that.
What sort of player was Dav? What sort of player was he?
Yeah, very quick, very good support player. very quick. He were Academy International, I think, back in those days, which were very unusual, coming from a team like Dewsbury when there were such heavyweights of the game as Leeds and Wigan, which would obviously supply many of the players that made those teams. So it was a great achievement for him, to make that Great Britain Academy squad. I think Sean Long was 94,
Sean Long was my halfback, but I thought we had a great team at Dewsbury at the time. We'd recruited Les Holiday, we'd recruited Mark Conway, we recruited Tony Marchant, we had Darren Fleary, who were a young lad at Dewsbury at the time, and Eddie Rombo on wing, and then we had Rich, who I think me and Rich came as halfbacks to the club, and I was a lot younger than Rich. I think he's about 10 years older than me. I don't know how old you are. How old are you?
You'd be able to tell 48.
48, all right. So he's 4 year older than me now. So we kind of both signed at the club as halfbacks, and we had Norman Smith at the time as coach. And for me, basically, I was on trial at Dewsbury to start, and kind of had a couple of trial matches. One of them being at Hemel-Hempstead. I always remember it. It were a nightmare field. It was like a little park field that we were playing on, and we played against, I think they were called London Crusaders back in them days, playing at Crystal Palace. And again, I'll never forget it because they were full of Russian players. And it were literally back in them days. I looked at the team sheet and every one of them were A and other. And then when they did have a name, you couldn't call them out basically. And my first ever game for Dewsbury on trial, again, I remember it from a guy called Sean James, Tigger. He got sent off for chucking sand in somebody's eyes while they're while they were tackling him, and again it was just great, great days. And then like Richard,
it sounds like it.
Yeah, no, it was just it were back.
Times have changed.
It was so, and you know what? And it's probably great that we've got Rich here, because I only ever remember the times of being around rugby league when it were my time, and the times have totally changed. I see it firsthand as a CEO dealing with players, but I'm sure Rich sees it every single day from a coach's perspective. But there were great times, and Rich is right. He did take me under his wing a little bit, and I was young. I was only 17. I was naive in the game, but fantastic team. And we kind of failed that year, I think, in '94, didn't we? We had a good enough team. Les Holiday were a class player. We had Paul Delaney, who were again another good player at the club. And then younger players like Darren Rogers, who went on to, I think he played Great Britain Academy before me. Nathan Graham, who was the fullback at the time, and I think now he's the assistant coach at Dewsbury, if I remember now. And we lost a couple of games where we should have won. But yeah, it were me and Rich have gone. I think he's the only guy I really speak to since them days. Really, I don't really keep in touch with many of them now, unfortunately. But me and Rich have always, I suppose, been involved in rugby league. And
I think you pass across in the sport too. Obviously, from a professional point of view, we've got a dual registration with Featherstone. Well, I'm close mates with Mark Campbell, who's obviously the chairman of the club. I try and spend as much time down here as I can because our dual registration players play here. So we have a working relationship, which I guess is only enhanced really because we've all got some history together and a little bit of a backstory that we're probably friends before we work colleagues as well. So it works pretty well for us at the moment, and it's great for me that when your friends are involved, sometimes you can have the more difficult and frank conversations that you need to have that sometimes might not be as easy with people that you haven't got that sort of personal relationship with.
I think we get dissed a lot as well for the dual registration partnership. I think there's one thing that's absolutely certain with the register. Leeds are sending us some of the quality players. They're not just sending us kids that are academy.
Look, I've mixed views on it because I can see. If I were a Featherstone Rovers fan, I don't know what the fans' take on it is, but I can totally understand as a coach or even a fan as why it's difficult. In terms of having your own identity, it's difficult for us. We would much rather have our players playing in our colours in our system.
Yeah.
But what we know they get is they get a really good standard of rugby. I think behind the scenes, it's important to know how much our players buy into it, that it is part of our pathway. I don't think another couple of clubs that have such a fruitful and productive relationship as what we do. We think the players that we send, Ashton Golding's playing Super League now, Alex Sutcliffe's playing Super League now, Callum McLennan had a terrific impact. We're sending players that not only can enhance your team, but actually buy into being a Featherstone player, and I think that's important. They're not coming under sufferance thinking, I've got to go to Featherstone and play this week and train on a night. I know some of our boys that have doubled up on training in the day, gone to train on a night because they didn't want to miss video down here, and wholly buy into the fact that, especially the longer term ones, that they are a Featherstone player, and if they're not playing at Leeds, it's a terrific place to come and play your trade, enhance your game. It's first team rugby. It's always played in front of a good and passionate, sizable crowd. So we've embraced it as much as in an ideal world. I think we all can hark back to the days when we had thriving reserve grade teams. We all remember those days and really enjoyed those days. But the game has changed and move on. There's fiscal issues around it. But I think we'd try and make it work as best we can, and our players, I'm quite proud of the fact they really buy into the fact.
And I think they do, Rich, because I think from I see it from a Featherstone point of view, and the players that we've had down here, and some players have got every right to have their heads down. When we had players like Brad Dwyer down here a couple of years ago, he could have just sunk his head. He didn't. I remember the game. We played Rochdale. He scored 6 tries in 23 minutes. I think he'd have gone on to score 10 if he'd kept on the field. An example, Liam Sutcliffe this year. He came on. He had a dual reg appearance with us, and again played fantastic. I think it was against Swinton when we were a little bit in the trenches down here, and Liam pulled off a break and inside pass for a try to be scored on the post. So I think the reason why the Fev fans are quite happy now, or they've come to terms with it, we've won hearts and minds, is that I would say every single Leeds player that's played for Featherstone Rovers has given 100%, no doubt about it. And I think last year, the 3 players that we had really towards the back end, which Rich said in Ash Golding, Alex Sutcliffe and Callum McClelland, were fantastic and integral to our playoff success, really. Yeah,
we don't set the rules. We don't make the rules. If we could go back and have thriving reserve grade teams and populate the game more and have more players like that, I think we'd all love those days back. But they're not, and unfortunately that's the way it is now. So I think making the best of what the cards that you dealt is something that we've tried to do, and I think the rewards have been there for both teams. Even the fact that we got James Harrison over to play with us during this lockdown period, because we knew the schedules were going to be very, very heavy, and we're going to have a number of midweek games, and we just thought, again, that was a terrific experience for us to have a look at James, but for him to come and test himself in a full-time environment, and hopefully he comes back to Featherstone an improved and more experienced player.
You touched on earlier on about you playing in your day, and how much has the game changed? I would imagine massively, hasn't it? The game's changed so much since sort of in your playing days.
I think the first thing, obviously, we played in winter, which were miserable to say the least. Sometimes you were entering the field of play and there were puddles all over the place, and the first tackle you were soaked. And I think I started playing out with we started with the old cotton shirts. They're still in the early 90s. We had the cotton, and it weren't good experiences really in the winter. But certainly, like I said, Rich has been around it a little bit closer to me, and
the game's evolved. I think moving to summer's been for want to upset the traditionalists, I think moving to summer's been a real positive, positive move for the game. I think in terms of your ability to train on a summer's night and facilities, status of the surfaces that you're playing on, I think it makes for an improved game from a skill point of view. The rules have changed. 5 metres to 10 metres were probably the biggest rule change that they came in overnight too. Maurice Lindsay just rang everybody up and said we're going from 5 metres to 10 metres, but that really dictated massive changes in the way that the game was played and coached. Interchange numbers have changed. We've seen more changes now in terms of 6 again. So the game's, has evolved sort of out of sight since then. I'll say, look, if you want to go back and watch old videos, I thought, the late 80s and early 90s were a particularly strong period for our game in terms of you measure it by how Great Britain were doing. You know, Great Britain were regularly winning tests against Australia. With a number of Welsh Rugby Union superstars joined the game up here, and I thought that were a really strong period for the game. But there's no doubt the advent of summer rugby and full-time professionalism is, you know, just a major game changer for the sport as a whole, and it looks so much different, you know, as we are in 2020 now to where we were in the late 80s. It just looks like a, you know, different game at times.
I mean, I was lucky enough there as well, Darren, to see that transition from winter to summer, because I was at Bradford Bulls at the time. So in going from 1995, which we all know that Odsal had its own climate anyway, it were very bleak in the winter time, to then suddenly coming out in 1996 as a summer Super League club that suddenly embraced all the razzmatazz that Super League had to offer at the time, and you know, you suddenly saw Odsal and that ball. It totally worked as a Super League summer club. You know, they went from the average of 4,500 fans, Bradford Northern, the big packs, beer bellies, to suddenly the Bradford Bulls, the, you know, Bull Power and 23,000 crowds, in, you know, and that were all because it just, as a stadium, that absolutely worked in summer, where it didn't work in the winter months. So I think Rich is right. It's the game now looks so much better. You know, when you do view it from, like I do most Super League games now, from the settee on a Friday night, Friday night, you know, the stadiums look great. You know, Warrington have really embraced what they're doing. Obviously, the brand new stadium at Headingley now looks fantastic, and that's where we've got to aspire to be. You know, it's as a club that's just now completed an application to be in Super League. Absolutely, our stadium is a nice stadium, but it's a traditional stadium. You know, we can use that to our
boutique.
Yeah. So we still got that ability to be able to have the fans feel like it's on top of you. You know, when we've got 3,500-4,000 fans down here, you know, it's noisy. It's got a great atmosphere. When you put 6,500 fans in here, I think I said it on Sky Sports the other day, it can be quite intimidating. So, and I've only seen that a couple of times recently, where the club played Leeds Rhinos in 2016 in the qualifiers. You know, it were a full house. It were great. You know, and obviously in 2012 when they played Castleford in the Challenge Cup, you know, I've seen the fans celebrating afterwards. I mean, it must have been epic down here to have seen that game. So yeah, I think the move to summers, it's made it a lot better.
You're listening to the first episode of the Up Rovers podcast with the Featherstone Rovers CEO Davide Longo and, of course, the head coach of Leeds Rhinos, Richard Agar. Still to come, we're going to be chatting about recruitment going into next season and, of course, the Centenary celebrations of 100 years of Featherstone.
This is Up the Rovers.
Okay, first of all, I think the big thing, you just mentioned that earlier on, is the Super League application. This 12 team that's going into Super League. What has had to be put into that application? What do you have to prove in that application to the Super League that Featherstone Rovers are ready? Rovers ready, yeah. Do you know what? As a lot of people have seen the assessment that the criteria assessment that we had to complete. I mean, basically, it's just giving you a full picture of what the club has been doing and what it's capable of doing. So, you know, we've a lot of the information that we've submitted is stored centrally anyway, because we're under what we call a return on investment model in the Championship and League One. So basically, just to explain that's what we do is we get measured against other clubs on our digital footprint, our attendances, our financials, and our governance. So basically what we just had to do is just expand a little bit on those areas. You know, one area that we came really strong in the return on investment model was our financial performance. We ranked first out of the 25 clubs. So it's a great achievement for Featherstone Rovers to be ranked and acknowledged as the best in the Tier 2 and Tier 3 competitions. Of course, we had to show that we can field a team that's going to be competitive in Super League, because, again, we're a proud club. We don't just want to
be given a 12 spot in Super League and then just become the rubbing rags. And me and Rich have had numerous conversations on the phone about, the areas where we need to strengthen as a club. And it's not just on the field, it's the coaching side of it as well. It's the resources that you need, the full-time environments, which again Rich will probably touch on a little bit, and also the back office staff. We need a couple of more appointments to be made. Hopefully we'll be selling more tickets to the Super League club than what we would do on a normal match day. The club will become more busier. So we had to demonstrate a lot of that, Darren, in the application. A lot of it's all got to be backed up with evidence as well. It can't just be. It's not a sales pitch that we're doing that's backed up with nothing. It's all got to be backed up with evidence that we can demonstrate. And I think one thing that what nobody can argue about is that the club over the last 10 years has been the most consistent club in the Championship. We've mentioned it numerous times now. 5 grand finals in the last 10 years. We were the last grand finalists in 2019. The fantastic work that the volunteers and the club did in building this stadium up to what it is today. It rewards for hard work is what we've said. And over the last 10 years, the Super League and the Rugby Football League have asked clubs to demonstrate examples of how they've improved. And I think we're a club that leads the way on that. We've improved a traditional stadium. We're still very connected to our community. This is, Featherstone is Featherstone Rovers really. But what we had to demonstrate is our catchment is just wider than Featherstone, Darren, because a lot of, there's a misconception that Featherstone Rovers only services Featherstone. That's wrong. We're 1.8 mile away from Pontefract. We're a couple of mile away from Nottingley. We're Ackworth, South Emsall, North Emsall, Kirby.
I found that playing for Travels Saints as a junior. There's a lot of juniors I played with. So while we were predominantly Featherstone, a lot of juniors there were kids would come from, Ackworth, Pontefract, Charleston, as far out as Emsworth and South Kirby. And that's always sort of been the case for the local team around here. The catchment area does stem, much beyond this, this village too.
What's your overall thoughts on the application process, Rich? I mean, you're a head coach. Obviously, there's a number of teams that are vying for that place in Super League, and obviously it's a big shame that obviously what happened to Toronto has happened to Toronto.
Yeah.
Is this the right direction of trying to get another team in?
Well, I think it's going to be a controversial decision, whoever the pick. Because I think it's. I think you can find pros and cons for every team. You can find some really good, strong, valid reasons, and unfortunately, there's a panel of people that's got to make a decision that's not going to be popular in some quarters and upset some people. I know Lord Jonathan Kane, that's the chair, and let me tell you, he's such a lovely bloke that I sort of hope it don't come down to his casting vote, and he's cast as the person that that makes this decision, and that there is an overwhelming standout candidate, but the chips are stacked against him. I'll tell you, only receiving £1 million. Receiving £1 million, having such a short lead into a season. The season's been brought forward again. So to scramble a team together, a full-time operation, get all your players in and get them ready for a Super League season, let me tell you, that's not going to be easy. That's going to be a very, very difficult proposition, whoever gets in. Because until you get the green light, there's not a whole lot you can do to move anything forward. So I think it's a tough decision, born out of very difficult circumstances with Toronto. I think it's a really tough decision for the panel, and I think it's a tough one for the club, whoever gets up, because such is the magnitude of trying to get all that thrown together at the last minute. The chips are very much going to be against them. Let me tell you.
You talked about how ready Rovers are. Rovers ready. Hashtag. And you've talked about a little bit on the business side, how good. What other things and what areas do you need to improve on? Do you think what are the areas do you think in the application maybe that were maybe lacking? Do you think?
Well, again, we've tried to be really honest through the application, Darren. We've kind of alluded to the fact that we don't have glitzy shopping centres and landmarks that people want to come and see at Featherstone. What we offer is a rugby league experience. And I think it's only right to say that the club has been building for several years now. Rich is right. We're not delusional here. It's going to be very tough to put a Super League team together in a couple of months. But what we can focus on is the rugby league side, because off field, really, we have got the infrastructure in place. And we don't need to worry too much about the infrastructure. Whereas we do need to be concentrating more on getting the team ready. It's one area that I feel we can really grow into is a latent fan base. We don't have to engage or try to get new fans in at the club. We have to re-engage the fans that have for whatever reason have stopped following the club. The club's had the door slammed in its face a couple of times, and these people are proud around Featherstone. They never forget. They don't like change too much, and when I've tried to change things here at Featherstone, it's you have to drag people kicking and screaming to that change. But we've succeeded in that. We've certainly strengthened the brand. The brand has a more professional feel to it. The club has a more professional feel to it. Yeah. Just doing little things like we're doing now, Darren, today, the podcast. Just bringing different aspects to the club and utilising the technology that's out there. We've now got an ability to be able to do that. We've got lease lines coming into the stadium now, so the Wi-Fi's and the connectivity is a lot better than it has been at Featherstone. The experience, the match day experience at Featherstone, implemented a fan zone, all the stuff now that you need to do as a club to make it a
very good match day announcer.
Good match day announcer, and you, Darren. Yep. The music, it's fun. Sometimes, we get questions sometimes when there's a little fight breaks out. We're playing Benny Hill over the speakers, and a player gets sent off, and we're playing it the road jack. But you know what? It's just a bit of razzmatazz. When you're winning and everything's upbeat, it just adds to the occasion. I always remember the fan that said to me, we had the players walking out, we had the fireworks going off.
Yeah.
And she spent time putting an email together saying why we're wasting hundreds of pounds on fireworks going off when the players are entering the field. Well, the reason why we're doing it, because it just adds a little bit more atmosphere to the stadium. Yeah. There weren't hundreds of pounds. There were, I think it cost us 50 quid to do that. But this is what you have to invest in. It's not just always about, buying more players. The club has to, you've got to pretty much have, your ambition has to match the resources you've got behind you, because there's no point being too ambitious and then you haven't got the money to stack it up. And, and it's managing expectations. Rich is right. We can't, we, as a championship club, we can go out there and we can talk about promotion and, we're going to win more games than we're going to lose. Our expectation as a championship club is that our fans need to be with us to get us promoted. As a Super League club, if we did get the 12th spot, we've got to manage expectations, because we're not going to go out there and win 20 games.
I think the team that comes up, regardless of what the rhetoric might be, is to finish above bottom.
That's right.
Finish second bottom. London came up the other year, when they beat Toronto in that playoff game, and I don't think London spent a whole heap on the squad or the coaching staff. Wardy and Jamie Langley did a wonderful job. They nearly did it.
10 games.
It went right to the absolute wire. So the reality is, you don't have to set the bar to finish in the top 5 or 6 in Super League by getting up. And given the everything we've talked about in terms of the time constraints and how difficult the market is going to be, recruitment wise, and getting your full time operation up and running in a matter of a couple of weeks, really. The reality is that survival would be an enormous achievement, but if you can do that, then you can build from there.
That's right. And I think one thing that the club's always had, Darren, and again Rich will know it more than me, is it's always been labelled the underdog. It's always had the David and Goliath stories attached to it. In '83, which Rich will know fondly and remember that fondly. Hull had to just turn up that day at Wembley and beat Featherstone. They could have done it easily and they didn't. And
I think the club's got goes without saying, Dav, the club's got a rich history, and your Rovers are ready where you're rolling all your old players. I've really loved seeing that, because I've not seen some of them blokes for 20 years. So see what they look like these days. Fantastic. But I'd point to your more recent history. That you've alluded to a little bit. We're sat in a stadium that has gradually improved over the last 10 years. Improved out of sight from probably the last time Featherstone were in the top echelons of the game. You've got an owner that's supported the team to the point where you've made 5 grand finals in 10 years, did you say?
Yeah,
Rarely being out of the top 4 or top 5 in that time. So I think the ambition to keep the team there over such a period of time, the ambition to drive forward your ground, build your training centre like you have done, when reserve grade were up, you're running reserve grade. I think you have tried to, as much in the constraints of what being a championship club is, tried to continuously evolve and move your club forward.
Yeah, and it's tough. I mean, the thing is with the Championship as well, it's a tough division. It's totally different to Super League. Players will say that. The ruck speed's a lot slower. We when we signed Cameron King last year from the NRL, the first couple of games when Cameron were coming off the field, he couldn't believe what were happening. And I don't want to bag referees, but it's just natural. In the Championship, it is a lot slower. There's a lot more there's a lot more bodies lying around the ruck. So, when I think Brett Ferguson mentioned it to me as well, which made sense. In Super League, the rucks are kind of rolling all the time. The defensive lines are, they struggle to get back, and then they're coming out again. Whereas in the Championship, defensive lines are pretty much set. They're ready to go and they're ready to bash you. And at the top end of the chart, certainly the 4 or 5 clubs that are ambitious, you get some fantastic games. There's some real high level games, and I think again that were demonstrated through the playoff series in 2019, because when we got to hear the viewing figures from Sky Sports of the games that had been played, there were comparisons to Super League games. I think they were getting up to 150,000 viewers, 200,000 viewers for these Championship playoff games, which is fantastic. It's a good competition, but ultimately, as a club, you've got to be ambitious. You've got to want to be in the top tier.
I think this is something always set in my mind. When I first joined you guys here, I always remember having a chat, the initial chat I had with, I think you and with Ryan Sparks, who was the then media manager, and you both said to me at that point, we're running this place like it's a Super League club. And that's how we want it to look on the outside, and that was everything. So that it was the social media, everything you were doing behind the scenes. You were trying to run this like a Super League club, and I suppose that's what it's looked like, and that's why it's probably not a bad application that you've put in.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, we acknowledge the fact that the other 2 clubs around us in Wakefield and Castleford were Super League clubs, and we didn't have that status as a Super League club, but off the field, you were right, Darren, we could operate at an higher level. And, the small investments that we've made at the club just to make the experience better, getting the PA system right, getting the speakers to boom and they're all in tandem with each other. So, and again, not just for the entertainment value of it, but the safety element of the stadium as well. Yeah. The brand had lost some of its image, really. Before we got here, I think from something like 2011 to 2016, the brand had changed 2 or 3 times. They'd gone to the pirate, and they'd lost the town crest within the brand. And then obviously when we came here, Mark Campbell had changed the brand to the one that we've got today. And the first thing that you've got to do with a brand is you've got to hold the brand. For it to be identifiable, people, you can't keep changing it. So, and then I remember doing a training day with the staff, and we spoke about brand strengths and what it meant to people, and what we had to do is really work hard on that. So actually, when people look at the Featherstone Rovers brand, it's them first words that people think about, and I'm hoping that we've changed that now to certainly a respectful club. People know I always feel when people come to Featherstone now, they know they're going to be in for a game of rugby league. They're not just going to come down. We're not going to just roll over and get us bellies tickled down here. We're here to play rugby league, and we're here to honour some of the great players that have represented this club. And again, it's my alignment really to rugby league as a kid growing up were more at Wakefield. But I did say it the other day. When I was growing up as a kid, I didn't differentiate between Wakefield, Castleford and Featherstone. They were all top flight clubs. In fact, the time when I started watching Wakefield, they were a 2nd division club. Featherstone and Cass were in the top flight. And you know what? They all had great players. I used to, as a kid, I was lucky that my dad used to kind of take me around the district, because if back in my day, really, if I have to be true to myself, when Wigan were in town, that's who everybody wanted to see, Wigan, in the 80s and 90s. So, I remember Jonathan Davis playing down at Featherstone for Widnes because we wanted to see Jonathan Davis, but the atmosphere was great.
I can honestly say stuff like that is what inspired, I guess, my generation of kids. So, I lived in North Featherstone, and then we moved across the lines and went to South Featherstone. But the area in terms of producing young talent, we supported Featherstone as kids. But at the same time, you could come down here and watch Ellery Hanley play, Steve Eller, Peter Sterling, Brett Kenny, a lot of them superhuman players that, were superstars of the game then. And that's a standout memory for me is, standing in the Bullock Shed when Wigan had come down and you got to see the superstars. And that's what the kids ain't got now. And that's where Featherstone have probably struggled, really. I know dyed-in-the-wool Featherstone fans whose either kids or grandkids, they want to go see the players and the stars that they see on the television. So I've seen them walking around with a lad with a Huddersfield shirt on or a Bradford shirt when Bradford were in Super League, or even a Leeds shirt, because they want to go and they want to see the stars of today on the television, and that's I guess. One of the factors that Featherstone's had to contend with, and almost a little bit of sadness, really, that the young kids around here don't get what we had as kids, where, the big hitters were rolling into town every second week or every third week, and you got to see the biggest stars of the game playing down here because, without doubt, casting my own mind back, when we used to play on the old welfare fields, we used to play on the FCG out there, Featherstone Cricket Ground. We would put us different shirts on at different teams and pretend to be some of these stars that we would watch down here on a Sunday. And I think it's a shame, really, that through no fault of their own at the time, that was sort of taken away from Featherstone, and they've never had the opportunity to get it back. And I've often wondered if they did get the opportunity to get back in Super League, what the response from the public and the catchment area and what knock-on effect that would have on junior rugby in this area. Yeah,
because I think that's, again, I've alluded to this before, although it's going to be our centenary year next year, 100 years old.
Yeah.
There's one thing that's unknown in Super League, and that's Featherstone Rovers. We'd be brand new to Super League, and I did look at the last season, the 1994-95 season, just for the attendance figures, just out of curiosity, and that season they got over 5,000 3 times. That were against Castleford, Wigan and Leeds. The Wakefield attendance that year were pretty low, but I think that's because Wakefield they were second bottom to finish that year, and probably they were it just weren't going to be. It might have all been done and dusted for Wakefield at the time, but you kind of look at that, and we're restricted to a capacity of 6,900 down at Featherstone. So you know what, we did put in the application saying that. We're not delusional. We're not going to say that straight away we're going to get those sort of crowds. But
what would you need, Dav? What would you need as a figure on your crowd to make it work?
I think our break-even point's 4,000.
Yeah.
So I think we've been very realistic. I mean, we've had to budget for 2021. I mean, again, let's be full here. It sounds all easy. There's this budgeting and forecasting and putting growth plans in place. We're still in the middle of a pandemic at this moment in time, and we ain't got a clue which direction.
Maybe not from this morning, pal.
Well, exactly, yeah. But
that's very true.
Yeah, we just don't know what direction this is going to turn. And for me personally, as an administrator, it's been really difficult because we pride ourselves in being in control. I'm not saying I'm a control freak, but I think we can look at previous business trends and behaviour trends to kind of be able to forecast precisely on what we're doing for the season after. Well.
This is completely unknown.
We can't, we're budgeting now for behind closed doors games in March. We're hoping to get fans back in April.
History will tell you the teams that come up have found it difficult, and some have survived 100% there. I played at Widnes in 2001. Widnes, I think, got promoted that year and then finished around 6th. And that's probably as high as a team has got coming up. Generally, it's a real dogfight down the bottom end. In the middle of a pandemic, the recruitment market is massively different this year because of the shutdowns. You look in the NRL no Queensland Cup played, no New South Wales Cup. So the actual movement in and around the NRL is less. And then when you're talking to players about coming over here at the moment where in Sydney they're out on the beaches, the bars and the cafes are open, well, come over to England in the middle of a lockdown. Yeah, it's really not an easy sell. You are going to get players because of the, I guess the confidence that the situation is going to change, and it will be opportunity for some players to keep the careers going and an opportunity to experience a different way of life and a different way of football. But let me tell you, it is more challenging this year than it's ever been, and the circumstances in whichever team gets promoted, it's going to be, as we've already said earlier, it's going to be a big challenge for them, real big challenge.
Yeah, much tougher than I think anybody thinks. Okay, so how confident, how nervous, what are you thinking right at the moment, Dav? Now the application's in, where are you sat? How confident, how nervous? Where are you on that sort of like the Davometer?
Yeah, well, I'm not nervous. I mean, the hard work's happened over the last 2 weeks. We've submitted the application now. It's in, and we believe as a club we've put a real strong case forward. We've been honest throughout the application. We've not offered a sales pitch, or we've not come in, with whistles and bells all over it, saying we're going to do X, Y, and Z. We've kind of just said this is what we are as a club. These are the budgets that what you're giving us to spend. We believe we can put a competitive team out there.
What's the major criteria, Dav? I've not seen it. I've not paid any attention to what the RFL are looking for. But what's the who's say RFL or Super League, and what's the major criteria? What you're going to get judged on? Do you think?
I think when I've kind of completed the application now, I really do think it's about what your squad is now and what changes you're going to have to make for us. So basically, if you've got a squad that's probably regarded as not very experienced, and you're going to have to make 15 to 18 changes to your squad to get, like you said, we've got a month and a half.
How financially you can improve your squad too.
Yeah. So what we've done is we've outlaid what our squad is currently, which we've got 28 players on our playing roster for next season. That were obviously built to be a competitive championship squad. However, we have got a number of players that have got lots of Super League experience. Chris Wellham, Brett Ferris, Dale Ferguson, Thomas Minns. These are all players. Craig Hall. They've all got over 100 appearances in Super League. New Brown coming over, who's 38 NRL appearances and 5 tests for Samoa. So, highly experienced players. So what we had to demonstrate is, what players would we take forward in terms of, the Super League nature and the full-time nature of that competition, and how many players we feel we'd need, which again, probably 5 to 7 players to start with to get us to the starting line. I mean, again, Rich is rolling his eyes there, thinking I might be under-egging that, but again, we've got to work within the reduced budgets. What we can't afford to do is suddenly go into Super League and start spending a boatload of money, and then still find ourselves bottom of it, relegated, and we, as a club, we're going to be back to square one. Because, like we said, the bit that I pride myself on really is the fact that we were ranked first in the ROI in terms of financial performance. That's huge for our club. It just tells everybody that we are a sustainable business. We work hard here at Featherstone. We attract lots of different businesses and revenue streams. We own the stadium. It gives us a huge advantage across many other clubs that don't own the stadiums, because they're very limited to what income streams they can bring in beyond the distribution and gate receipts. Where here at Featherstone, once we still get, hopefully we'll get back to some normality soon, when we can start to bring in the private events and the Barla finals that we do well out of down here. The football team that's down here. Once that can start bringing more fans in, this is a business now that's operating pretty much 364 days a year. It's the model that Leeds and Gary Everton had kind of mentioned to me when I worked at Leeds, that your stadium can't just be open 13 times a season. It's got to be open all the time, and you've got to be generating income all the time. we've got the ability to do that, and I think that's what it does give us a competitive edge over many of the other applicants that have applied for Super League.
It's exciting times, there's no doubt about that. It's going to be interesting to see how it all comes out. And also, Jay from the In-Betweeners is really backing it as well. So
yeah, we did. Well, look, it is what it is. I mean, it's a bit of fun. It's a laugh.
I did laugh.
Some fans, some fans just. I think they've lost a sense of humour. I mean, we weren't getting Jay to endorse us. We were just getting a bit of reach and a bit of publicity, and it were non-offensive, wasn't it? It weren't.
No, you'll soon realise, Dav. You're damned if you do. You're damned if you don't.
You're listening to the Up the Rovers podcast.
Well, as we said, it's the centenary of Featherstone Rovers in 2021, whichever league that Featherstone Rovers are in next season. What sort of plans have you got for the centenary? Have you got any ideas so far what you're going to be doing?
Yeah, well, we've obviously been quite limited in terms of events that are going to attract people here at the moment in time. As you can imagine, to put on a huge event for a centenary, it's long-term planning. One thing that we are looking at doing, and it will be, we haven't come up with the name yet, but just for this, we'll call it the Centenary Square. So very, very similar to what Leeds United have done, and I think Liverpool and Rangers, they're the examples. We're using the exact same company that's done the Leeds United one. So it's the plaques that people, because again, we want it to be interactive. We want it to be where people can see that they're supporting the centenary year. So that'll be done down at the fan zone. That'll be getting launched in a couple of days, so people will start to see that. You'll be very aware now of the new logo that we've incorporated in all our kits and literature that we're sending out. The new centenary logo, and like you said, just touching back on the Super League, we mentioned it in the application that one thing that the broadcaster likes, they obviously like meaningful fixtures and full stadiums, but they also like stories. Now, I believe it writes its own story for Featherstone Rovers. They're in a club that's steeped in its history and the last 100 years that it gets acknowledged and rewarded in its centenary year to participate in the top flight. So, again, we want to do justice to all the fantastic players and coaches and administrators and fans that have been down at the club. It's we've done so much over the last couple of years with the Legends Suite and some of the other stuff that we've done around the club to acknowledge the players that have represented the club and stuff. So yeah, we want to have a main event, Darren. We really would want to have a main event where we can invite everybody down, but obviously we're quite limited on that at this moment in time. Yeah. So I think we'll launch the Centenary Square, and that'll be the first one that we'll see for the new year. And then we'll just work alongside the government guidelines in terms of what we can do in terms of number of people, indoor events and stuff like that. But yeah, we would like to have a big one going on at the club sometime towards the back end of next year. Yeah,
that'd be good. And Rich, I mean, Centenary is a fantastic thing for a club like Featherstone, and it's good to go. Whichever league Featherstone are in next season, it's going to be quite an exciting year, all told, I think.
Yeah, I think so. Dav's already mentioned it numerous times. There's a very rich history and I guess tapestry to this club over that 100 years. For such a small battling town, if you like, the heights that it's scaled within the game. The name Featherstone Rovers is widely known and used brand throughout the world of rugby league. The number of players that the club's produced from the area that have gone on to be successful players or international players or cup final winning players or captains is certainly something worth celebrating, and I think there's nothing more than a certain demographic of rugby league fan loves a bit of nostalgia.
Yeah,
I think one thing that we have, I mean, last couple of seasons when I've seen Rich and I've showed him the new shirt for the new season, he generally just chucks it back at me and says, "No, it's got a bit butcher's stripe." And then, so this season when we brought it back,
there you go.
I showed him it and he went, "Absolutely, that's a Fev shirt." And then when we were doing the away shirt, we had a couple of images of Graham Steadman in the shirt and the colour. Obviously, the pictures had faded and stuff like that, so we couldn't get the. And then Richard sent me a video of his dad in the actual shirt, so we could see it with that cyan blue, wow, the proper blue of the shirt. And I think we've nailed the away shirt. Again, it's, behind the scenes, Mark Kirby, Chris Iance and Stephen Parker, who have got just every bit of information that you need about Featherstone Rovers. They kind of told me about this Cronulla style away shirt that they
early 80s.
Yeah, early 80s. They only wore it a
80s,
couple of years, but they said the fans loved it. And we've seen in the sales this year that both shirts, the butcher stripe and the away shirt.
They didn't get to wear it that much anyway because there ain't too many colour clashes for Featherstone in the butcher stripe. So it didn't see. It's all more like a day playing A-team rugby actually at the time, Dav. And I think that's one challenge that you've got is there's going to be a big portion of your fans that love all this nostalgia, but your challenge is the re-engagement of the new fans. And like I talk about, I go down to Featherstone Lions sometimes. I've done a bit of education with the coaches over the last couple of years, and that is still a thriving hub of junior rugby league. But as I said to you earlier, a lot of them want to see the star. So to get them engaged, sometimes there's the family history that gets them into this club. But to get your new generation of supporter, it's an opportunity that if you did make it to Super League, you've almost got a chance to scoop up a new generation of people that hopefully you can buy into your club for many years.
That's right, and we've said it as a club. It's we love the flat cappers. The flat cap and all that. It's great that the club's kind of remembered for that period, and some of the old photographs when you see them down here where every single fan's got a flat cap on. But again, Rich is right. It's changing those flat caps for baseball caps, getting the younger generation in here, and I think we all saw the video that went out with the primary school down the road at St Thomas. 10 or 12 children on there with the flat caps on, alluding to some of the stuff that's happened over with the club over the years. I thought it was fantastic. That's the generation of fans that we want talking and shouting about Featherstone Rovers. Of course, we like. I love. Contrary to a lot of people's belief down at Featherstone, I love the history and heritage of anything. When Rich tells me stories. Told me I want him to actually tell this story because he told me a fantastic story about Terry Clausen.
I've got a few Terry Clausens.
but that one.
I'm not sure we can pull over them out.
I'm still laughing about the one about the best player.
It's a podcast, so you can actually say anything. It's not radio.
Common folklore has Terry Clausen as the first ever full-time professional. Terry was a full-time professional back in the 60s and 70s when most players worked or were miners down the pit. Terry didn't do a lot of work back in them days, so became famous for engineering moves to clubs. When he needed a little bit more cash in his pocket, Terry would engineer a move or fall out with the coach, and it made he got another payday. But yeah, the famous, I think it was Kath Etherington, who was the best player you've ever seen. Terry Clausen when he was skint.
Great stories. I mean, and some of them, you can listen and you can listen to these stories forever. I mean, I actually went and saw Neil Fox the other week, and he'd done a supporting letter for the application. Not so much from obviously Neil on behalf of his two brothers, Don and Peter, and I didn't know his dad had played down here as well. And again, when you speak, Neil, although his wife said he can't remember what happened yesterday, he can remember everything that happened in his career. And Neil can tell, he can tell these stories. And sometimes when I worked at Wakefield at the time, and Neil would come in, he'd be talking about a game, and you'd think he'd be talking about like some junior game. He was talking about the World Cup final that he played in for Great Britain. They were just rolling off the tongue. So, you know what? To end it with a centenary year, it would be fantastic to really celebrate that in Super League. But you're right. If we're in the Championship, we'll be still celebrating it there as well.
I think either way, there's plenty to celebrate on a centenary, isn't there?
Yeah.
When you look back at the history of the club, there's so much, and where the club is now, there's so much to celebrate. And look, if you don't get the spot, then a strong team and a strong competitor is going to go up and out on promotions on the next year. So it can be just a special year if if you don't get the nod on your application anyway.
Yeah.
Positive mental attitude. That's what I like to hear. Well, that's it for the first episode of Up the Rovers. Thanks very much for downloading and for subscribing. Big thanks, of course, to our guests on this episode, CEO of Featherstone Rovers, Dav Longo. Thank you very much, Dav.
Cheers, Darren.
And, of course, head coach of Leeds Rhinos, Richard Agar. Thanks very much.
Cheers,
make sure you subscribe on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, especially for those ones listening on YouTube or Rovers TV, because that's where the podcast is going to be based long term. A massive massive thanks to our main club partners, KP, Millennium Support, Webb Valley Aggregates and Wakefield AFC. And, of course, this podcast has been produced by LS11 Media and Proper Sport. My name's Darren Harper, and we'll be back for another episode very soon.
Up the Rovers, the official Featherstone Rovers podcast.